And with that, it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce Board Member Tony Thompson. I've had a great pleasure working with Tony since he joined the board, and it's really been inspired by his commitment to the mission of the PCOB, and just a pleasure to work with. I know that you will benefit greatly from hearing his views, and I know he's going to stick around a little bit throughout the day after his remarks as well in our Q&A session, which we'll roll into, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions as well. Tony is really, like I said, has been a big believer in the organization, has really brought a great mission-driven focus to the board. With that, I've just introduced to you Board Member Tony Thompson.
Thank you, Kent. Well, good morning, everyone. It's great being here. Being born and raised over in Fort Worth, Texas, it's always good to be back in Texas. As soon as that plane hits DFW, I just feel a little bit different. I've been a lot of places all over the world, but when that plane hits DFW, hits the tarmac, I just feel a little bit different. So it's great being here. Well, I'd like to welcome all the participants, both in the room and online, for our third series. We started this series a few years ago. Matter of fact, it started with Kent and I doing it virtually right after COVID, and then we expanded it to where all 5 board members get out to different regions. So this series has included board member visits to New Jersey in May of 2025, Chicago in April of this year. In March, there was a forum in Miami, but that was kind of a holdover from 2024. That was lots of hurricanes in Miami about this time last year, so we had that forum in March. And so I just want to say that it's been a commitment by the board. I really enjoy getting out, listening. I don't think you can do a mission without being in touch with people, kind of the boots on the ground kind of thought processes. But before I get started in earnest, I must share with you that any views that I share with you today are mine and not those necessarily of the PCOB board member or the board members or staff. So now that I got that out of the way, I just want to acknowledge that this is again, the 4th year that I've hosted a forum, and this is the 2nd in person, which I find, again, a lot more valuable than being virtual. Not to say they weren't productive, but just being in the room with people, and then those online still, I think, is very valuable. First of all, I want to say that I believe that direct engagement with firms enables the PCOB to be a more effective regulator. It is important for us to gain firsthand accounts about the impact of our regulatory actions to evaluate how we continue to drive better audit quality. Based on registration information that I have, I always like to tell people who's participating, who's in the room, so you kind of know. It appears that we have approximately 180 non-PCOB registrants with us today, either online or in person, with registrants from approximately 48 separate PCOB registered firms and 15 broker-dealer only firms, along with representatives from AICPA, the SEC, various issuers, academia, and more. So I hope that we get a lot out of today's forum and that it'll be a great experience for you as staff gets through the presentations for the rest of the day. So a little bit about me. Many of you may not know that I'm a father of 2, a grandfather of 2, and an uncle to many nieces and nephews. So you say, well, what's the connection with that? Well, over the course of my life, I've spent many of Saturday at youth sporting events. I say Saturdays, actually, it's, I had a nephew that my wife and I raised from the age of 10, and he was really big in the track. If you've ever done that, you start on a Thursday, and if he keeps winning, you're there through Sunday. So the only thing I would say is I was doing this in Virginia, Maryland, and in other places. If it was hot as it can get in Texas, I don't know if I'd be here today, because you're out in those open stadiums and whatnot. So, and again, I had other nieces. My daughters were in a lot of sporting activities, whether it was soccer, track, basketball. And one of the things that has struck me when attending these events is how passionate Some kids are about their sport and their team. The passionate kids are easy to spot. They often don't want to leave the field, or they may have the dirtiest uniform, or they anxiously bounce around waiting for their turn to get in the game, or they can't wait for the next practice so they can improve their results for the next matchup. So passion brings them to the field or to the court. It drives them to improve, and being passionate is a start. But progress comes when they take steps to improve, including studying the rules of the game, regularly practicing, and working with coaches and mentors. When a player combines passion with disciplined skill development, it often yields improved results. In my professional life, I have seen how passion coupled with disciplined development of technical skills accelerates progress. Since the start of my professional life as a young accounting and finance officer in the Air Force, second lieutenant, I have been in mission-related roles and have spent decades in leadership positions in the military and government service. I can identify when passion and technical expertise combine to drive results. I see it reflected in the care one takes to complete their work before their work is transmitted onward. I see it reflected in the questions one asks in meetings, evidencing their engagement and dedication. And I see it when one strives to deepen their knowledge and understanding to become a more effective contributor. Progress requires execution of expert capabilities to drive better outcomes. So when I joined the PCOB in January 2022, like many of you, I've been in many immersive experiences where I had to learn a whole lot about something quickly because people don't have time to wait for you to get up to speed. So my PCOB experience as a board member was one of those experiences. Like I said, I've been involved in financing and accounting, but not audit to the extent that I was as a board member. So one of the things you see right away, lots of stuff comes across your desk. So I knew, for example, just sitting at my desk and reviewing inspections reports, about a couple hundred of those a year, and enforcement actions, registrations, withdrawals, all those types of things that I had to get out and literally figure out what was going on. So it was incumbent upon me to understand our processes, the rigor, and the players. I needed to get out to the field and observe the players up close. And with that in mind, I set out to observe our inspection program. Thus far, I have observed a global network firm, both domestically and internationally. And it's a little bit different internationally because you're dealing with other regulatory authorities. So they're in the room with the PCOB inspectors, and so that was a whole different experience to be able to see that up close and personal. A non-affiliated firm inspection, a broker-dealer inspection, and a non-U.S. Firm inspection. From my observations, I was able to glean valuable insights about how we pursue our mission. Our inspectors are earnest about protecting investors and seek to conduct their procedures with care and professionalism. It's amazing to watch them. I mean, the diplomacy and the patience that they showed through that process was just, those processes were amazing. I also observed auditors that were earnest about demonstrating how they were executing their gatekeeping role. And during these field observations, I witnessed constructive interactions, respectful exchanges, and extensive deliberations. The inspections process is iterative. Firms have given opportunities to demonstrate to our inspectors the rigor in their audit work, the rationale for their professional judgments, and steps to improve their quality control systems through remediation. These iterative engagements are essential to advancing audit quality. Investors in our capital markets are better protected when audits are executed in accordance with PCOB standards. I know that is your goal. It is part of the reason that you are here today, and it is why you share your perspectives and comments with us. That's why I'm in the room. I'd really like to hear from you. You also share with the SEC, advocacy groups, and it's why some of you volunteer to your time to sit on PCB PCOB advisory boards. Now, auditors of smaller public companies and broker-dealers have a vital role in our capital markets. As such, it is incumbent upon the PCOB to devise resources and tools that enhance their expertise in applying PCOB rules and standards. The board's oversight activities suggest that there is more we can do to help firms execute their gatekeeping function. I would like to highlight 3 ways in which we are doing just that. First, we are providing additional time for the effective implementation of QC 1000, and you can't be paying attention to the news if you probably haven't heard about QC 1000 and what's happening with that. So, secondly, the PCOB is issuing more staff publications with a focus on firms that audit smaller public companies and broker-dealers. And third, the PCOB recently created a smaller firm resource group. And let me expand on these 3 points. So probably by now, again, you heard that the QC 1000, the effective date has been deferred from December 15, 2025 to December 15, 2026. QC 1000 is one of, if not the most pivotal standard that the PCOB has adopted in a long time. There's a lot to it. So among other things, it enhances our risk assessment requirements. It increases accountability for firm governance. But I continue to believe, as noted in my public statement when the PCOB adopted QC 1000, that a firm's robust and effective QC system is fundamental to producing high-quality audits consistently. We have seen through our oversight activities that when firms, both large and small, have a strong QC system, it positively impacts the quality of audits performed by the firm. Last year at the New Jersey Small Business and Broker-Dealer Forum, I was able to share and reflected on the long history of this standard-setting process. It literally has been in the works for over a decade in terms of a standard-setting process to ensure that there are numerous opportunities for stakeholder interest. I mean, to me, that's the magic, is making sure that you got all of the, nothing is ever going to be perfect by the time you roll it out, but you want to get as much input as possible. So that input informed the QC standard that the board adopted in 2024 and that the SEC subsequently approved also in 2024. The standard as adopted is risk-based to allow scalability. That word is very important to me because, again, of the, roughly, I was dropping a little bit, but less than 1,500 public companies, many of them are very small, mom and pop type operations. And so you have to write something not only for the GNS, but you also have to have that scalability. So we want to make sure that we get that right. So during the course of the year, again, getting that feedback, we informed that some firms are well on their way to implementing QC 1000. Some said we'd be ready by as early as October, and others encountered, challenges. So while some firms benefited from implementing ISQM1, you may remember that that's the international standard. It looks a lot, well, I guess depends on your perspective. It could look a lot like QC 1000, depends on who you talk to, but that's kind of the road that some firms have already been on, so they may have learned from that, that process and that implementation. So given the challenges we learned of, particularly for these smaller firms, we delayed the effective date of the standard to provide firms with an additional year to tackle the challenges. Effective implementation is the goal. I'm optimistic that the additional time facilitates effective compliance across all firms by the new effective date. Given the significance of this standard, our staff has published numerous resources on our website to assist firms in their implementation efforts. I encourage all of you, I encourage firms to contact our staff with questions and suggestions for additional implementation resources that could be helpful. For those firms who are on track to implement QC 1000 by December 15, 2025, its originally announced effective date, I encourage those firms to continue electing to comply. So we're kind of in the firm meeting season now with the global network firms, and some of those with more than 100 issuers. So you can better believe that's one question that one of the 4 board members will ask in terms of where they are in that process, because we're very interested. And early adoption is certainly is encouraged. So we're asking them not to let their foot off the gas in terms of staying the course. Second, the staff is issuing more publications geared towards auditors of smaller public companies and broker-dealers. Again, getting information out, getting dialogue, to be able to answer questions. So we want firms to build on their audit successes and to progress in areas where they may have fallen short. A central way that we can drive audit quality is by sharing insights into our regulatory activities on a regular basis. Improved audit quality is not a sprint. It just takes time. It takes continuous monitoring and, at times, adjustments to processes that yield better results. Investors rely on auditors to execute their audits faithfully and effectively. Auditors rely on us, PCOB, to increase their awareness and understanding of audit requirements. To be fair and consistent, and that's one of the, my kind of mantras, is the fact of being fair and consistent. I strongly believe that where there is complexity or confusion, we should bring clarity. And where there is challenge, we should encourage conversation and cooperation. In the past few years, the PCOB staff has prioritized issuing spotlight publications that highlight specific inspection focus areas, which summarize PCOB inspection results and good practices, and that outline PCOB inspection priorities for the coming year. Additionally, last year, the staff launched its Audit Focus Series, which was developed with auditors of smaller public companies in mind. This series focused on areas where we continue to identify deficiencies, but also good practices. This ensures we highlight not just areas of concern, but also what is working well with audit. So we want to see kind of both sides of the equation. The staff has already covered 6 topics in this series, including critical audit matters, journal entries, and auditing accounting estimates. And just last week, the staff published the first installation of a new series focused on broker-dealer audits, titled Broker-Dealer Audit Focus, with a focus on deficiencies related to review procedures required by Attestation Standard Number 2. We want to hear from you. Tell us whether these resources are beneficial or your ideas for improvement. And tell us whether there are topics you would like the staff to discuss to drive continuous improvement of audit procedures. Lastly, the PCOB established a smaller firm resource group, and I think this was a great innovation. Looking forward to a lot of benefit from having that group formed. So for much of its history, PCOB has relied on its advisory groups, which we have 2, to provide insight and perspectives on certain regulatory activities. While we've had smaller firm representatives on our investor advisory group and our standards and emerging issues advisory group, there was a need to reach more firms from this segment of firms. As such, this summer, the board announced the establishment of the Smaller Firm Resource Group, comprised of 12 individuals who have volunteered their time. The group includes representatives from a range of smaller firms and public companies and broker-dealers. I anticipate that the Smaller Firm Resource Group will provide our staff with greater perspective on the practical application of rules and standards, including how we can make them scalable for smaller firms. I hope that the group will also share any challenges or obstacles that they encounter in implementing requirements under our rules and standards. In closing, y'all don't have to sigh at the same time. I anticipate that you will gain insights and useful information from today's panels. Our dedicated inspections staff will provide practical guidance related to both public company and broker-dealer audits, and you will hear updates from the PCOB's Division of Enforcement and Investigations in our Office of Chief Auditor. Importantly, you will also hear from the SEC, I know it's recorded, but they got a good message, and FINRA on matters within their purview. So before I take some questions, I want to again thank you all for joining us here today. I'm going to hang around, and I always like to give a shout out to our staff. They're amazing in terms of what they will provide and the contributions they make on a day-to-day basis. So again, thank you, and look forward to taking some questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Tony. And as Tony said, we're going to take up the rest of this time for this session. About, I guess we've got another 30 minutes. And so either in person or online, feel free to use the Q&A function, and we'll work through questions as they come in. We have a couple questions that have come in previously to those who reached out via the email. So I'll paraphrase sort of like groups of questions that were very similar, and we can go through some, and then I'll keep monitoring here to see what additional ones come up. But a couple questions around this, just wanted to get out, and you mentioned it, you alluded to it in your comment previously during your remarks of the 4 board members currently, and of course the PCOB board traditionally has 5. So now that Chair Williams has left the PCOB board, and you and your board member colleagues, the fact that there are 4 now sort of, with the indication of a unique period in the time of the PCOB board. So I think a couple questions come in around the theme of like what can firms and what can just the general public expect from the board over the next few months, and what do you see sort of the future direction of the PCOB?
No, thanks, Kent. So one of the things that I've come to acknowledge over my professional life is embracing change and adapting. And I've been in many positions where I've been able to practice that over my professional life. And so for me, it's all about, as Kent said in introducing me, I stay focused on what the mission is, and unless somebody comes along and tells me it's different, then we're going to execute. So we're doing inspections the way we've always done them. When we see things, we take enforcement actions. We were drawing firms, we're registering firms. We are, staying attuned to obviously things that are happening around us. But again, working with the SEC and others. But for me, it's not a lot of stress, not a lot of anxiety, because just keep the ball in front of you and execute based upon what we are supposed to be doing in terms of our mandate until someone comes along and tell you to do something different. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah. Spoken like a true former military man.
Yeah.
as I said earlier, Tony, it's inspiring to see his mission-driven focus, and I think that probably comes from that experience of working in the military, and he's always on time. So it's always appreciated, those two skills and viewpoints that he brings to the board. Why don't we just go through, and for the first CPE code for this session, we're just going to do this the old-fashioned way, and I'm just going to read them off. So 658, 658, 658. And we'll have 3 more for this session, so just to preview that. Making sure everyone's paying attention. A couple other, and this was noteworthy towards the end of last year, and it's a couple other questions around this topic. So just paraphrasing a couple that have come in, and noting the PCOB's inspection staff observing improvements into Part 1A deficiency rates last year. So how do you view that? And then sort of like it raises the larger question of how do you view the PCOB's role in advancing audit quality? And you talked about it in your remarks about a collaborative approach. So, just question around those 2 general,
Sure.
but related questions. One is,
Sure.
What do you see out of what we saw last year, the improved deficiency rates from the firms, large and small, and then how does it help you think about how you view the role of the PCOB in advancing audit quality?
Yeah, I would tell you, I was probably genuinely surprised when we saw the 2024 reports, across firms, but, specifically looking at the the GNF when, some of those deficiency rates in Part 1A findings were creeping up into levels that if you follow the trend from like the creation of the PCOB, and if you like analysis and numbers, you can, see the line and where it went. Eventually it was high and then it went low and then, kind of stabilized. And in 2024, something happened where they went extremely high, 48, 60%, in some cases, 80% deficiency rates based upon the number of audits. And so, clearly that was a matter of discussion with the firms in terms of why it was going up. And, my intuition said that when you look at the principle of auditing like anything else, that maybe something was happening based upon, folks working remotely, virtual work environments. You didn't get the experience of working in the room with your boss through sometimes osmosis and other things, how you learn. Well, you don't get to do that on screen to the, to degree. So there's a lot of things I was thinking about, but, we've, obviously had a chance to speak with firms and whatnot and learn a little bit. And that was some of it, but there are other factors involved. But I think the good news story, if you look at our 25 results, it looks like things are improving. So obviously there was a lot of emphasis with our inspection teams, our staff, with the board. Again, when we engage, it's probably top 5 things we are talking about, with firms when we get those opportunities about, what are you doing? Some of it is technology. There are many factors that are going into improving, but the good news story is that it's actually a turnaround in most cases.
Great. Well, you mentioned in your remarks as well, I think the registration numbers for today's event, at least, we've got 13 to 15 broker-dealer only audit firms, and this is always the number one question we receive when we do these events around from the broker-dealer community, auditing community is there any current plans or is there any update about a consideration of a permanent inspection program for the auditors or broker-dealers?
Well, first of all, I think my first impression, again, that was one of the deeper dives that I did in terms of, it being a temporary program and would take congressional action to actually make it a permanent program. And then coming in as a new board, well, what's the priorities in terms of the 5 things you want to get done or, maybe the 10 things. So obviously there was an evaluation of that. And to be quite honest with you, since then, a lot of other things we've been immersed in terms of what the top 5 priorities look like today as opposed to what they look like, 4 years ago. So there's no plans. We don't have a research project. We don't have any engagement because, again, it's going to take legislation, so that means you would have to have Hill engagement to be able to, sponsor something like this. So there's no action. But what I can tell you, and this is what I've shared with the broker-dealer team is, again, my up-close observations of that program. Very tight-run ship, both from the folks that we're inspecting as well as our, professional inspection staff. And, at some point in time, I personally would like to see it, as one of our top priorities to go ahead, because I don't see you doing anything else. I mean, I think we, would want to support a permanent program at some point, but currently today, no plans.
Good, great. Well, thank you. A couple associated one just came through, and again, folks, please continue to send in questions in real time over the social Q&A. And you mentioned in your remarks again the smaller firm resource focus group that the board has put together, and the question is, how does one get involved in that? And so this is something I'm happy to take this just because it's something that our office has played a part in addition to our office of the chief auditor. There will be, I'm assuming that there will be additional opportunities for reconstituting the membership of that moving forward, and so just keep your eye out for that process. Call for nominations, either nominate yourself or have someone nominate you or your firm to be a member of that in an advisory role. And excuse me. And then the other thing to do is just to sign up for PCOB communications, email announcements. You can go through our website. You can identify yourself as a smaller firm practitioner, and by doing that, You can obviously get all of our communications, but anything specific to smaller firms, if you sign up and identify yourself as someone from a smaller firm, auditor, smaller firm practitioner, you'll get the communications specific to that universe. So those are just a couple ways to get involved. And again, just keep an eye out for the next time a call for nominations comes out for the smaller firm resource group.
And Ken, could I just add something real quick, just an observation I wanted to share with us. Again, back to when I was, learning the scale of from, big four accounting firms to how small can a small firm get. And, pre-COVID, inspectors were telling me about, they'd go out on inspections and they may be escorted in someone's garage, living room, whatever. So that, getting a true sight picture of what you're dealing with on that scale, it helps us, certainly be considerate of, what we're doing in terms of, our rules and our standards that we're pushing out. So I hope that this small group I'm optimistic that they can help us in that regard.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then this is, another question similar along the same lines, but came in prior, and so we can maybe take this one now. But before I do that, our second CPE code for this morning's session is 719. 719. Okay, and Tony, you started speaking to this, so it sort of like dovetails nicely into this. Mm-hmm. And how does the PCUB consider the practical realities and resource constraints of smaller firms and those that they face?
Well, I think it starts with just numbers. I mean, if you, when I look at, the GNF firms, and they have massive accounting technology platforms, and they got a name. I mean, so I know all the names that they use. And so when they do things like augment with AI, and not generative yet, but just the tools and whatnot, they tend to augment these systems on huge platforms that they've invested sometimes, billions of dollars into. So then back to that scale, what does a mid-sized firm do when it comes to resources and technology in terms of our rules? And so that's why we spend a lot of time, trying to figure out on a ground level, what a particular standard rule will impact based upon, if you got more than 100 issues, you got less than 100 issues, you may have one issuer. How does that impact in terms of resources? So that's why it takes at least 15 months on a standard, and some of our commenters, think that we probably should go back to a couple of years. Now, it will be by the time we get through with QC 1000, you're probably talking 2.5, maybe 3 years in that process. But that's why it takes so long, because you have to figure all this out rather than just pushing a standard, because you can have seriously adverse impacts on smaller firms if you don't consider the resources that they have to deal with, a one-partner, two-partner firm, as opposed to, again, some with these massive, systems and resources and whatnot, and they can turn on a dime in a lot of cases in terms of reacting to what we're doing.
You mentioned AI in some firms, use of AI, and it's obviously, a huge topic across the economy, across the profession, and even, for many of the folks here in this room or joining us remotely. So, I mean, where do you stand? Where do you sort of the auditor's use of artificial intelligence for risk assessment, substantive testing purposes, and sort of where does the PCAOB itself stand in the PCAOB's own use of data and technology and perhaps AI?
Okay, yeah, Kent, you're taking me back a little. I can recall, one of the things I like to do when I have these type of engagements is always pick a university or two and go speak to the business schools, specifically the accountants, and learn about aspirations, what they think about the field, why they are choosing accounting as a profession. Listen to the faculty, listen to the to the professors and whatnot. So about 3 almost 4 years ago, I went to a university, and that was a question that was asked, but it was asked with a lot of trepidation, with a lot of anxiety, like, I'm not going to have a job when I graduate. And to be honest with you, it was the first time I'd heard the question, so I had to think about it. Now, I think I'm exceeding 5 decades of work experience now. So I've seen the promise of technology, and I've seen what it delivers in terms of what people said it's going to do and what it does. So my initial response was that, like many things, the tools will come to play. We'll use them. We'll get more efficient. But I didn't see at that time that it would actually replace, people. So as we talk to the firms, over the last, 3 years, it's still a discussion about tools. Remember, I talked about those huge platforms they have. So they're augmenting in terms of the 1 to 3 year staff of the associates to where you're not doing 80 hours a week grunt work, where it was a badge of honor to pour through hundreds of documents, Excel spreadsheets, workbooks, and whatnot. That was just a badge of honor to get where you needed to go in terms of maybe being considered for higher order opportunities. However, when you hear an announcement, I tend not to mention firms, but you all probably know who it is. When a firm says that we're actually thinking that this technology is going to eliminate the need for, first-year associates, second-year associates, whatnot. So now we're beyond tools to make people better in their job. Now, again, it's a question we ask of all the GNS, and that's a one-off from that Wall Street Journal, Financial Times article that I read a few weeks ago. Most still say it's about making people more efficient through the use of tools. Now, my concern is when it gets, and they're using Copilot and some of these things that all of us should be familiar with, and that's what is being shared. Now, my concern moving forward is when you get into generative AI is the decision or knowledge management portion of it, where you trust something that has as much knowledge as you should have on a subject, and you're giving it to a decision maker to make a decision, and so at what point and who becomes responsible? And I spent most of my professional career sweating a little bit because I'm giving a decision to a decision maker, and I know my career is on the line if it don't go well. So that's the part of AI that I'm, kind of concerned about. Now, in terms of what we're doing at the PCOB, we know we got to keep up. I mean, we process terabytes on top of terabytes of financial firm, data that our inspectors use for modeling in terms of what they're going to be looking at for risk analysis over the next several years for inspections and those types of things. And so if the firms are leaving us in the wind, so to speak, with technology, then that inhibits our ability to be able to be as effective as we need to be. So we definitely internally got to look at AI. We don't have those huge budgets that the GNFs have to invest, billions of dollars in it, but we are looking at smart ways, efficient ways to invest in AI, so we are keeping up to the best of our ability.
Great. Let me give now the third CPE code for this session, as we've got about 10 minutes left, and it is 255. 255. 255. Tony, you talked about just in this most recent answer, the perceived, I guess, or maybe it's real or getting more real, the threat to sort of the staffing, lower staffing, sort of the intro staffing issues at the firms. But as the profession as a whole, it seems like we've had a conversation over the last couple of years about the talent pipeline in the profession, and is it where it needs to be? Is it where it should be to make sure that we're having this continual flow of folks who are interested in public company auditing and broker-dealer auditing and all the rest? So I just wonder where you think we are now as opposed to a year or two ago when it was a huge topic of conversation. Maybe it's the issue is a little more acute now that you layer AI on top of it. And then what you see sort of, does the PCOB board, do you view a role for the PCOB in helping firms or encouraging folks to choose auditing as a profession?
No, thanks, Kent. Well, first of all, I think anybody involved in the profession is an ambassador, for the field. Whether I don't know how it happened, but again, the nephew I raised, he's working at KPMG. He's an audit. He was a finance major and whatnot. So I don't know if just living under the roof with me that happened or whatever, but I think it starts everywhere you touch people, with family, colleagues you come in, touch, to talk about what a great and fundamental career, that this is in terms of audit and accounting. So the PCOB is taking on a similar perspective. Like I said, if I can get to 2 or 3 colleges while I'm out on these type of engagements, that's what I'll do. I love engaging with that staff, and I talk about, with passion, as I talked about in the speak, what this does, in terms of a career. And all decisions somehow tie back to the fidelity and the pristine condition of the financial reports or whatever somebody's making a decision from. So that, to me, that's a great career. It's a great place to be. One of the things we talk about when we're out on the road is the PCOB Scholar Program. I think we hit a high water mark this year, 676 scholarships, $15,000 each. And, that's a good chunk of change for, any student. I don't care what your financial situation is. So we talk about that. And I listen to the barriers in terms of why people, or should say the notion that students are not choosing accounting as a career. I mean, finance, they're paying more money, and, maybe the J.P. Morgans of the world or Goldman Sachs and whatnot, do you want to take that path or whatnot? And so we had a lot of reasons at first, 3 or 4 years ago, when this was like the hottest topic. I still think it's a hot topic because the numbers, if you look at trend analysis, you're not getting the number of accounting graduates that would sustain, the career in audit and certainly in accounting, and those that elect to become CPAs to do all that work. So it's still a challenge. I think everybody in this room, I think all the firms, I think the PCOB has a responsible thing to do. And one of the things I've done in my career is I surround myself with fellows and interns, because I think it keeps you energized. It keeps you young. And so, for instance, I've probably, in my 4 years, I think I'm on my second fellow, and typically a fellow is a PhD student in accounting. They may never work for the PCOB, but being in that setting where they get to see a board member and a board staff make decisions on things that affect the whole audit ecosystem, I think is a very valuable and a one-off opportunity that many people get at that stage of their career. So conversely, also with the interns, and they're not doing filing. I have them do assessments on some of the things we're looking at in terms of inspection reports and enforcement actions and those type of things. So again, they may never come back to work, and most of them are going to leave that internship, leave that fellowship, and go work for one of the G&F firms. That's pretty much, I think, all of them have done that. And I'm not the only one. Each board member does that. The divisions offices are doing it also at the same time. But I think, just being able to share a story about, your career, your profession, and, how it is important as any other profession in terms of the capital market system.
Yeah, and I know that you're going to Texas Wesleyan tomorrow.
Yes.
So I know you're looking forward to that, and it's always a great, energizing thing to get out in front of auditing, accounting students and encouraging them.
Can I share about a fun fact about that?
Of course you can.
You never know where life's going to take you. I graduated from high school 2 blocks from Texas Wesleyan University. I used to walk across the campus after football practice and whatnot because I lived in the adjoining neighborhood. So who would have thought all these years later I'm going to go and talk to the students? So that brings a little bit of passion as well.
Yeah, no, it's great, and you can tell, and I think it's really inspiring for students to see that and to hear board members out there talking about the importance of the profession to the capital markets and it being a great business, it being a great career path, and because it's such a great business, it's starting to get the attention of private equity.
Yes.
So what are your views? Does the PCOB, as a board member, have a view about whether that's a good thing, bad thing? Is it something that you're monitoring? And what are your views? I guess, I don't know the specific question other than your general outlook and views on private equity entering the audit and accounting space.
Can we talk? So this is a situation where and I think my fellow board members, again, not speaking for them, just giving you kind of a sense of how we have how we've interpreted things that are happened with the companies that the firms that have chosen to go that route, and so I'm really forcing myself in some regard to be agnostic, to say, okay, regardless of what you may have seen in other industries, healthcare being one of them, and some of the things in terms of the long-term evolution of private equity and how it turns out in the end and whatnot, really I think our focus is just keeping an eye, kind of a laser eye on making sure that as these firms undergo this change, that they stay independent, because that's the number one thing, that audits should be independent. They shouldn't get mixed in with the other businesses, the consulting side and other businesses of a firm, regardless of what's going on. So as long as those firewalls, stay up and stay pure, we will stay, at least I will stay agnostic, in that regard. But I think we have to be super vigilant on making sure that if we see a turn there where that's not happening or that is breached, then I think we have to, make sure that we're not late, to need in terms of being able to get in front of that.
Great. Let me give the final CPE code for this session, which is 670. 670. And then we're just about running up against the end of the session. So Tony, is there anything that we didn't cover, or you didn't want to make sure that you got across that you weren't able to, or just leave it open to you? And if not, we can just move on to our next presentation.
No, I would just say if there's any burning question, we've got time for one.
Okay.
Yep. Is there any burning question from anyone?
We'll take one from the room. Sorry, folks online, but we'll do this the old-fashioned way. If anyone's, go ahead and raise. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Tony, for the opportunity. Thank you for the questions, and we'll turn it over to our colleagues from DRI here in another few minutes. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.